Right, Shavua Tov, we are all in place. 3 weeks since we've been in the company of David HaMelech. I apologize for that. It's been rather a busy time. And we are in chapter 22 of Shmuel Aleph. Let's just have a bit of a recap because we've probably all forgotten where we're up to. We took the last week or so, we took a detour. Previous to this, at the end of chapter 21, we had an episode where, well, let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at chapter 21 on the screen straight away. This is recapping where we'd got up to. So there we go. There's chapter 21. You'll remember David ran away from Shaul after the episode with Jonathan, and he came to the city of Nov, which was a priestly city, and he asked this chap here, Achimelech, who seems to be the chief priest at the time, he asked him for bread, and he asked him for a sword, for weapons. The only weapon he had, in fact, was Goliath's sword. So Achimelech was not really convinced that David was on a secret mission for the king, which is what he told him. But nevertheless, he gave him bread. He gave him the holy bread, in fact, the shoe breads, and he gave him the special sword of Goliath, and off David went. He then came to the king of Gat and pretended to be crazy because the servants of the king of Gat wanted to kill David, remembering what David had done to the Philistines earlier on after the battle with Goliath. In order to get away from this, David pretended to be crazy, and the king of Gat, although he may not have been completely convinced by the acting of David, he let him go and chucked him out. That was the end of chapter 21. So chapter 22, which is now on the screen for you, the last week or so, the first 5 psukim, which is what we did last time, was a slight digression from the story of the city of Nov. We followed David into the cave of Adullam, and we mentioned then, in connection with that, the connection with Yehuda, David's ancestor. Adullam is where Yehuda went down to just before the story of Tamar. And then he went to Moab, which reminded us that David's ancestry also includes Moab. He went to his great grandmother on his father's side. Ruth went to her family. And he was in a stronghold there, and he was outside of the territory of Judah. He was in Moab. And the last pasuk that we did last time was this pasuk here, Vayomer Gad Hanavi El David, and Gad the prophet said, "Don't stay here, go back to the land of Judah." I showed you last week where you'd met Gad before, not last week, the last time. Gad, of course, we say in Tachnun, Vayomer David el Gad, Sa'ali Ma'od, and David said to Gad, I mean, big shtoch here, and this was not here, this was a little bit later on in Shmuel Bet, but we talked about Gad the prophet. So that was a digression, and where we're up to now is verse 6. Can you see it on the screen? Have you got it on the screen? Yeah. So we're up to verse 6, and we're now going back to the story of the city of Nov. So in a way, the first 5 psukim in this chapter that we did last time are in brackets. That was what David was up to. But Shaul is now about to hear and take notice of what has gone on in Nov, the city of Nov, where Achimelech gave David his bread and his sword, or Goliath's sword. So let's go from verse 6, Jeffrey, please.
Saul heard that David and the men with him had been discovered. Saul was sitting in Gibeah under the tamarisk tree with his spear in his hand, with all his servants standing about him. Saul said to his servants who were standing about him, "Listen now, fellow Benjamites. Is the son of Jesse going to give you all fields and vineyards? Is he going to make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? That you have all organized against me, and no one revealed to me that my son covenanted with the son of Jesse, and that none amongst you is distressed for me or reveals to me that my son has incited my servant to rise up and ambush me as clearly as, in brackets, as this day."
Stop there. So Shaul heard that what had gone on. Shaul heard that David and his band of how many men? Can you remember how many men David had with him? It's a relevant number.
400.
400, correct. And its relevance is, of course, that this was the number of men that Esav had with him when Yaakov went to meet him. 400 men is indicative of a strong fighting force. Although David's bunch were a bunch of miscreants, as we said last time, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So Saul heard about this, and he was sitting in Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on a hill, and his spear was in his hand. Okay, why are we told that? Why are we told where he was sitting and that he had his spear in his hand? Yes, Jeffrey.
It would appear that every time he was melancholy, he had the spear in his hand.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Well spotted. Every time Jeffrey uses the word melancholy, because that's how it's translated sometimes, but we know, don't we, that it's this mishagas that he gets when he's mentally ill. Let's just remind ourselves where these places were. Let's have a look in, first of all, chapter 18, verse 10. I've highlighted it on the screen for you, Jeffrey.
Oh, and it was on the morrow that the evil spirit from God rested upon Saul, and he raved in the midst of the house, and David was playing with his hand like every day, and the spear was in Saul's hand. So
there we are, the evil spirit, this Ruach Elokim, this mishagas that comes over him, rested upon Saul, and he raved around, and he's got the spear in his hand. That's chapter 18. The same thing happens again in chapter 19. Let's have a look at that. Where are we at? Exactly where it was. There it is, verse 9, Jeffrey. There we go.
And an evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul, and he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing with his hand.
So you can see, and then what does he do? Of course, read verse 10 for us.
And Saul attempted to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he slipped away from before Saul, and Saul drove the spear into the wall, but David fled and escaped on that night.
So every time he's got the this mishagas on him, he's got this bad spirit, he's having a psychotic attack, he has the spear in his hand. So if we go back to our chapter here on the screen again, verse 6 tells us that he had the spear in his hand. He was sitting in Gibeah. What's the relevance of Gibeah? Gibeah is where his palace is. That's his stronghold. He's come back into his own Daladamas, if you like. He's in his inner sanctum in Gibeah, and he's under a tamarisk tree. And it mentions here, and it doesn't say it in the translation. I need to tell you what it says. Tachat ha'eshel. Eshel is a tamarisk tree. But Ramah. And it says here, on a hill. Now, we know what Ramah is, don't we? It's a hill. Ramat HaGolan, the Golan Heights. Ramat Poleg. Ramat HaSharon. Ramat everything. Okay, Ramah means a height, but Ramah is also a place, isn't it? It's a place. And whose stronghold, whose hometown was Ramah at this time? Have a guess. We've got three major characters in this story at the moment. We've got Shaul, who lives in Giva. We've got David, who comes from Bethlehem and is running around all over the place. Who's the third main character in this?
Jonathan.
Jonathan.
No, Jonathan is living with his father over there in Giva.
Elijah.
Elijah's not been born yet.
The king, what's his name?
You're on the right track though, Michael. What's the name of the book that we are learning?
Samuel.
Shmuel.
Oh,
Shmuel's hometown was Ramah. Shmuel of Ramah. And some of the Mefarshim want to suggest that the fact that we're told he was sitting under the tamarisk tree Beramah on a height is a little bit of a hint that Shaul's presence is hovering over this whole situation. And you'll see in a minute why I'm saying that. We haven't mentioned Shmuel for quite a while, but the fact that the pasuk here uses the word Ramah, we don't really need to be told where Shaul was sitting under this tamarisk tree on a hill, but he was. And the Mefarshim want to tell us that this implies that Shmuel's influence is hovering, and we'll come back to it in a minute. Just bear it in mind.
Waning.
Hovering around the situation. In other words, Shmuel's influence is in the situation here. Although Shmuel is not here, his influence is having an effect on the story that we're going to hear now.
Is Ramah in Giva?
Ramah is not in Giva. Ramah is northeast of Giva.
No, because the pasuk says, and Saul was sitting in Giva under the tamarisk in Ramah.
He wasn't sitting in the tamarisk tree in Ramah. He was sitting in a tamarisk tree on a hill. But it's a play on words. It's a play on words that the Ramah is meant to remind you, oh, I know somebody who lives in a place called Ramah, Shmuel. And it's just introducing or reintroducing Shmuel's influence here into this story. And you'll see in a minute what I mean. Let's just go on and you'll see in a minute what I mean. So what does he say to him? So we know, don't we, that he's not in a great state of mind right now because he's got his spear in his hand. That's the sign. Jeffrey was spot on there. That's the sign. People who are what we used to call in the trade going off. If you have somebody who's schizophrenic or psychotic and they're starting to have an episode, we used to say they're going off. And here the sign that Shaul may be going off is the fact that he's sat there with his spear in his hand. That's the telltale sign that we know that this Ruach Elokim, this spirit, this bad spirit is on him. So we know he's not in a good state of mental health at the moment. Now, let's go to verse 7 again, Jeffrey, and see what he says.
Saul said to his servants who were standing about him, listen now, in brackets, fellow Benjaminites, is the son of Jesse going to give you all fields and vineyards? Is he going to make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, that you have all organized against me, and no one revealed to me that my son covenanted with the son of Jesse, and that none among you is distressed for me, or reveals to me that my son has incited my servant to rise up and ambush me, as clearly, in brackets, as this day.
Okay, so what does that tell you? What is Shaul's overriding feeling in these two psukim?
Disloyalty of his men.
Disloyalty of his men. Disloyalty, correct. Disloyalty of his men. Yeah, and what does that make him feel like?
Everybody's against me.
Yeah.
Everybody's against me. What's that called in the paranoia? Okay, so there's another explanation or another description of Shaul's mental health problems. And this is a very, very common psychosis. Very commonly, people who are psychotic become paranoid. They think they hear voices around them. They think everybody is plotting against them. I remember the first time I ever came across this when I was quite a small child. There were two little wooden signs, little wooden plaques that were in Jeffrey's parents' house, which I didn't understand either of them. And one of them said, "Today is the tomorrow that you worried about yesterday." Do you remember that, Jeffrey?
Very well.
Today is the tomorrow that you worried about yesterday. And I spent hours as a small child. I mean, I spent more time in Jeffrey's parents' house than I did in my own house because we lived next door. And I spent hours looking at this thing, not understanding what it meant because I was putting the punctuation in the wrong place. When you actually say it properly, it's very clear that today is the tomorrow that you worried about yesterday. But I'm thinking today is the tomorrow and you worried about yesterday. What's all this about? I couldn't get my head around it at all. It took me ages. Anyway, that's irrelevant. But the other one that was there it said, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Right. And here we have Shaul, who is demonstrating clear paranoia. Now, actually, there's a little bit of truth in what he's saying, but not a lot, but there is a little bit of truth in what he's saying, and we'll see why. But just to stress this feeling of isolation that he has, the pasuk uses an expression here. Let's just have a break down the pasuk. Vayomer Shaul la'avadav. He says to his servants, Hanitzavim alav, who are standing by him. So if they're his servants that are standing by him, who are they?
His bodyguard.
His bodyguards, likely, yes. His bodyguards, his most trusted people, right? You're not going to have people around you that you don't trust. The ones that are standing right by him are going to be his most trusted advisors, possibly his bodyguards as well. So he's saying to these people who are meant to be his closest allies, the people that he can rely on the most, Shimu na b'nei Yemini, listen up, you children of Benjamin. Why is he stressing what tribe they come from?
Because that's his tribe.
That's his tribe, and it's not
David's tribe.
David's tribe. So he's saying right from the start, he's saying, just listen up, you lot. We're all meant to be in this together. You're meant to be on my side. You're from my tribe. And the other guy is not part of our team. So right from the beginning, he's using an expression which is designed to make the servants feel bad for what they have or haven't done. And then he goes on to say, Gam lekulchem. What's kulchem? Yes, Michael.
All of you, no?
Yes, all of you. Correct. Michael mouthed half of that and said
I'm
all.
sorry.
Yeah, but Johnny said it all.
Sorry, Mike.
All of you. Kulchem, all of you. Every single one of you. And that's an indication that he's completely feeling isolated. He's got his closest advisors around him, his bodyguards even, and he's accusing every single one of them right now of not behaving in a proper way towards him, meaning that he is completely alone and feeling threatened by everybody around him, even his closest advisors and bodyguards. And that's
he's saying that all of you are going to get something from me, so that's why you should support me.
Well, I don't think he's saying that all of you are going to get something from me. I think he's saying all of you have already got something from me. Let's have a look and see the next few words. He says, all of you, listen up, all of you. Gam will Jeff Ben Yishai. Again, that we've had that before, haven't we? He doesn't even want to say David's name. He calls him son of Yishai. It's a way of, it's a disparaging term. When you want to speak to somebody in a pleasant term, you use his first name, David. When you want to refer to him, somebody in a negative way, you'll use his surname.
Did they call you Lieberman Minor at school?
No, there wasn't a Lieberman Major, fortunately.
I would have called you Lieberman Minor.
I would have been Lieberman Minor had I had an older brother. No, yeah, at the same school, but no, I was just Lieberman. So here, David is Ben Yishai. Is this Ben Yishai also going to give you fields and vineyards? Implication, I have given you fields and vineyards. Okay, I've given you fields and vineyards. Okay, Lekulchem yasim sarei alafim v'sarei meot. Will he make all of you captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, like I have, in brackets? Right. In other words, who are you loyal to? You lousy lot. You should be loyal to me, because I have given you vineyards and fields, and I've made you into officers of thousands and officers of hundreds. Now, I said to you before, excuse me, I'm a bit hazery today. I said to you before that the spirit of Shmuel is hovering around here. And these last few words that we've just done are indicative and are little hints to us to go back to what Shmuel said all the way back to chapter 8. Has anybody got any idea what I'm talking about?
When he told Shaul that he was finished.
No, before that even.
We didn't know before that.
It was the point that David was anointed.
No, it's before.
Way before that. Go on,
oh, wait a minute. Yes, hang on.
Go on, Jeffrey.
Saul knew that there could not be a dynasty from any other person other than from the tribe of Judah. He knew that. He was told that, but he was still anointed king, knowing that his tribe would not be the king's dynasty.
Well, all of that is all correct, and all of what you've all said is correct. That Saul knew that David, that he didn't know it was David yet, but he knew that he'd had the kingship taken off him, as Paul said. He also will have known that the tribe of Judah was destined to be the kings, but that's not actually what I'm referring to, even though it's all correct. I'm thinking about the fields and the vineyards that he's given to his servants. Anita's looked it up already in chapter 8. So what does it say, Anita? I saw you cheating there. We can't hear you. You're muted. You're muted, Dolly. You're muted.
It's still muted.
So I was trying to look it up, but I didn't get it yet. I was listening to what everybody else.
All right, let me show it to you. It's over here. Right, Jeffrey, I've highlighted it for you, but before you start reading, this is what Shmuel said to the people when the people asked for a king. Remember, the people said, we want a king. And Shmuel, if you remember correctly, did not want there to be a king. He was very against the whole idea. And this is what he said to the people. Off you go, Jeffrey, verse 11 onwards.
And he said, this will be the manner of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to him for his chariots and for his horsemen, and they will run before his chariots. And he will appoint them to his commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and to plow his plowing and to reap his harvest, and to make his weapons and the equipment for his chariots. And he will take your daughters for his perfumers, for cooks and for bakers. And he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards and your olive trees, and will give them to his slaves.
Stop there. Stop there. That verse 14, he will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive trees, and he will give them le'avadav, which is translated here as slaves, but it can mean servants as well. Let's just look at our pasuk now. And he said to his avadav, same word, said to his servants, will the son of Jesse give you all fields and vineyards? So these are the servants that Shaul has given the fields and vineyards to, that he's taken off the people. So this is a proof. This verse here is a proof that Shmuel's prophecy to the people, I'm warning you people, if you have a king, he's going to take your fields, he's going to take your vineyards, and he's going to give them to his own people. He's going to give them to his own servants. And guess what? That's what he did. This verse tells us that that's what happened. So that's what I meant when I said that the spirit of Shmuel, the influence of Shmuel, is hovering over these psukim, because this is showing us that what Shmuel predicted back in chapter 8 came to pass, and that the fields and the vineyards were taken away. And will he appoint you captains of thousands and hundreds as well? Again, that's what Shmuel said in a negative way. Shmuel said he'll take your sons off you and he'll make them into army captains. And just to show you a little bit more, one more little thing, we need to go on to verse 17, which is badly translated on the screen. We're in chapter 22, Jeffrey. I'd like you to read 17, not from the screen, but from your art scroll. I want to hear what 17 is translated like.
The king then said to the footmen who stood about him, surround and kill the Kohanim of Hashem.
Okay, stop there. So you translated as footmen. Vayom HaMelech L'Ratzim. You translated that as footmen. It's got footmen on the screen as well. I can see, Johnny, have you got a Steinsaltz?
Steinsaltz says runners.
Yeah.
Runners, thank you, Rav Steinsaltz.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rav Steinsaltz. What does Ratzim mean? Runners. So Larutz means to run.
Messengers who human, like human pigeons, they go from one place to another.
That's the meaning. But the word rats means to run.
Yeah.
Runners. So footman may well be an accurate translation, but it's not literal translation. The literal translation is, as Rav Steinsaltz says, runners. Now let's go back to chapter 8. Is this chapter 8? No. Where's chapter 8? There's chapter 8. Okay. And what did he say earlier on here? Verse 11, Jeffrey, on the screen.
And he said, this will be the manner of the king who will reign over you. He'll take your sons and appoint them to be for his chariots and for his horsemen, and they will run before his chariots.
There we go. There's the Hebrew word, Veratsu lifnei merkavto, and they will run before his chariots. They're runners. Again, we go back to our chapter here. this is very subtly telling us that the prophecy of Shmuel in chapter 8, that a king will not be good for the people, has come to pass. Now, I want to show you another proof that Shmuel's prophecy came to pass. What was Shmuel saying? Shmuel was saying, he'll take your fields, he'll take your vineyards, he'll take your kids, take your sons, take your daughters. It ain't going to be great having a king. You're better off without one. Now, let's just go back, and maybe this is why we had the digression that we had. Remember, I told you that these first 5 psukim of this chapter, which we learned last time, where David went and what he did and everything, and he escaped to the cave. Maybe there's a reason why that digression, that tangent, if you like, was put in over here. Look at verse 2, please. Jeffrey, read us verse 2.
And every man who was in distress, and every man who had a creditor, and every man of embittered spirit gathered themselves to him, and he became a chief over them. And there were about 400 men with him. Okay, so who does he gather together? The people who are embittered of spirit, matzok. They're in trouble. We remember disenchanted people. Disenchanted people. That's right. And why are they?
It comes from the word matsuka.
We did that last time. Philip, I don't think you were with us. We talked about, we say it in the Tefillah L'Chayalim. Moret Chayalenu Mikol Tzara V'Tzuka.
V'Tzuka, yeah.
So these were, as Jeffrey said, disenchanted people. Why were they disenchanted? Because they...
by Saul.
Again, Michael?
Dispossessed by Saul.
Yeah, they'd been dispossessed by Paul. These were the people whose fields and vineyards Shaul had taken to give to his servants, which we find out about in verse 7. So there's all of these undercurrents going on here. If you remember chapter 8 over here, what Shmuel said to the people, he's going to make you runners. We've seen runners. He's going to take your fields and your vineyards. We've seen that. He's going to make them into captains. We've seen that. And then he goes on, he says, he'll tithe your crops and grains, and he'll give them to the officers and slaves. And he'll tithe your flocks, and you will be slaves to him. And you will cry out on that day because your king for whom you have chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will not answer you on that day. He's warning them what it's going to be like to have a king. And lo and behold, chapter 22 indicates to us in a subtle, hinting manner that actually that is what came to pass. So it's really interesting, this chapter, that you need to look at the background of what went on, where we were holding Shmuel's prophecy, and it comes out, a whole new light comes out of what Shaul says here. So to go back to the nub of the story, he says to his servants who are standing around him, and these are the people who he's given things to, so he's expecting them to be loyal, he's expecting them to support him, and he complains. He says, verse 8 again, Jeffrey.
That you have all organized against me, and no one revealed to me that my son covenanted with the son of Jesse, and that none amongst you is distressed for me or reveals to me that my son has incited my servant to rise up and ambush me, as clearly this day.
So again, we've got that word again, kulchem, all of you. He's accusing everybody of being in cahoots against him. It's the paranoia. Interesting translation. How did you say verse 8 at the beginning? Did you say organized against me? Did you say?
Yeah.
We've got rebelled against me here on the screen. What have you got, Johnny, please? Conspired. Johnny's got conspired. Look at the Hebrew word. Ki keshartem. What's the root of the word there? Come on, Barbara, you like these.
Kesher is false, isn't it? False.
That's same word, same letters, but the other way around. Sheker is false.
Yeah.
So what's kesher?
A knot. A knot to tie.
A knot. Great.
Yeah.
So what does a knot do? Yes. What does a knot do?
Connects.
Yeah, ties something together, doesn't it? So ki keshartem kulchem, you have all joined together against me. So I think again, out of all of those translations, I think probably the Steinsaltz conspired, or the Art Scroll organized is quite good as well. I don't like the translation here, rebelled, because it doesn't give us the flavor of joining. What have you got there, Michael, in your living Nach?
It's also conspiring.
Conspiring. Okay.
Rabbi Steinsaltz adds why he says conspiring. Even if you did not actually do anything in practice, this was your true intention. You didn't do anything, just let him go.
Right. So the point
right.
here, the point that comes out more strongly from the Hebrew than the English is ki keshartem kulchem. If I was translating that, I would be writing, because you lot have all joined together against me, because that gives the flavor of what Shaul's state of mind is. He thinks everybody around him is joining together to conspire against him. And it's that paranoia that's coming out. And what's his argument? Ein goleh et ozni. Nobody revealed to my ears, literally. Nobody revealed to my ears. Nobody told me. Bichrat b'ni in ben Yishai, that my son has made a covenant. Bichrat. Where do you see the word covenant there? You don't. The word covenant is
Brit.
Yes,
Brit.
You don't see the word Brit there. What do you see?
The cutting.
The cutting, correct. Karat means to cut. Philip, is it possible that the word karate comes from the Hebrew, which means I have cut? Karate means I have cut. Is it possible that the etymology of your beloved word karate is from the Hebrew karati, I have cut? No, Philip says no. Okay, well, it just occurred to me that
Not at all. Completely different.
Well, it would fit, wouldn't it? Karate, I have cut.
Karate means empty hand in Japanese.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. It shows you that you can't always rely on etymology. Anyway, karat means...
Just let me tell you something, Johnny. The word sakana, danger, exists in Japanese also. My theory is, etymologically speaking, when Jewish sailors, I think from the tribe of Dan, sailed eastwards, they encountered Japanese whale hunters, and they saw the whales being hunted by the Japanese, and they said, God, because it's still a staple of Japanese diet, whale meat. They said, God, sakana, sakana, it's a danger. And the Japanese called fish, sakana. That's the etymological explanation of the word.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you for that, Philip. Right, so karat is to cut. So bichrat bani in ben Yishai, my son has cut a deal. We say that in English, don't we? Lichrot bari in English will be to cut a deal. He's cut a deal with Ben Yishai and nobody told me. Well, is that fair? Who actually knew about the deal that David had done with Jonathan?
Nobody.
Jonathan.
Nobody knew.
There
wasn't anyone there. How do we know there wasn't anyone there? Let's just go back to our famous story of David and Jonathan, which is in chapter 19 or 20. I'm not sure which. Let's go back. Let's go back to
send the arrows of the boy away.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going for. Correct, Paul. Correct, Paul. Where is it? Must be chapter 19, I think. Let's go back to chapter 19. Yeah, here we go. No, chapter 20, I beg your pardon. There we go. So he has all this story here, go to the field, and he sends his servant away. He sends his servant away before he speaks to him. There we go, verse 36. No, verse 38. Verse 38. And Jonathan called after the lad, quickly, hasten, do not stand. And Jonathan's lad gathered up their arrows and came to his master. Verse 39. And the lad knew nothing. Only Jonathan and David knew the matter. Okay, very clearly spoken in the chapter. Only David and Jonathan knew the matter. And so Shaul, when it comes to our chapter of chapter 22, let's go back to that. When it comes to chapter 22, and he says, nobody told me. That's not fair. Nobody knew. The Tanakh tells us absolutely explicitly, only David and Jonathan knew the matter. Yes, Paul, you want to?
How did Shaul know?
He heard. This is what it says in verse 6. Shaul heard.
From where?
Don't know. Somebody must have. Well, no. Now, no. It's two different things, Paul. Shaul heard that David and the men who were with him had become known. This is later. David is now run off with 400 men. You can't keep that quiet. But the bris between Jonathan and David, still nobody knows that. He's found that out. Somebody's now split on it. But you can't blame the people around you for not telling you. They didn't know.
But still, but you still haven't asked the question. Nobody knew about this deal. Only Jonathan and David.
Yes.
So how can someone else have told him?
So
Hashem.
Well, I don't know. It's a good question, Paul. I don't know. It's a good question. How did he know about it? Vayishma Shaul ki noda David va'anashim. That the men with David had become known. The story got out, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know who told him. Maybe it was Hashem, as Michael said. Maybe he got a Ruach HaKodesh. He's heard, and he's not happy that nobody's told him up till now. I'm saying that this is part of his paranoia. They weren't expected to know. They couldn't have known any sooner than Shaul knew. They probably heard at the same time as Shaul. No one revealed to me that my son made a covenant with the son of Jesse. It may well be, but they don't even know that now. And that's news to them. And then look what happens next, what he says. Ve'ein chole mikem alai. Read that for us again, Jeffrey, verse 8, please.
That you have all organized against me, and no one revealed to me that my son covenanted with the son of Jesse, and that none among you is distressed for me, or reveals to me that my son has incited my servant to rise up and ambush me, as this day.
And then, so in the middle of that, we've got this expression here, Ve'ein chole mikem alai. None of you are literally chole. What's a chole? Sick. Yeah. None of you are sick
Ill.
for me.
Ill.
Yeah. None of you are sick on my behalf. In other words, as it says here, none of you feel sorry for me. I think Jeffrey said distressed for me. Again, he's playing on the emotions of the people around him. Why aren't you feeling sorry for me? It's not the kind of emotion that a king would normally want his people to feel for him, to feel sorry for him. Who do you feel sorry for? You feel sorry for a Nebuch, somebody who's a miskin, somebody who's an unfortunate, somebody who's Nebuch. You feel sorry for him, right? You don't feel sorry for a king. That's not the right emotion. He's all upside down here. Shaul's head's not in the right place, and he says, "You're all conspiring against me." Now, What do they say, these servants, in response? What is their response? What is their defense?
And nothing.
Nothing. Correct. They have nothing to say. Why have they got nothing to say? Because you can't defend yourself against a crazy guy who accuses you of something which you can't possibly have done. I've mentioned this many, many times, and I'll mention it again. My old boss, Dr. Olive Duddy, who is now an elderly lady, a very wise old Irish Catholic lady who taught me most of what I know in medicine, used to say, have one of her sayings was, if you cannot reason with an unreasonable person, so don't try. Somebody who is unreasonable, you cannot reason with them. And in this state of mind, Shaul was unreasonable. He's made an unreasonable accusation. His behavior is not reasoned. He's paranoid. He's got his spear in his hand. And the people around him don't answer. And they, we can't hear you, Paul. You're muted. You're muted, Paul.
I say, is that why they've taken away the court's ability to declare things unreasonable?
Possibly. I really don't want to go there, but yes, maybe. Let me think. Have they taken away the possibility to say that's unreasonable? So if it's not unreasonable, it is reasonable, then you can reason with them. No, I think it's probably better for them to be able to. You're right. That's probably why they're doing it. Okay. So anyway, the Shaul's state of mind at this point is unreasonable, and the people don't answer. But one person does pipe up. Now, where have we seen this chap before? The Doeg the Edomite. Verse 9, Jeffrey, please.
Then Doeg the Edomite, who was appointed over Saul's servants, spoke up and said, I saw the son of Jesse come to Nov, to Ahimelech's son of Ahitub.
Okay, stop there. Where have we seen this Doeg the Edomite before?
He actually says it there. I've seen him up in Nob when David actually goes to him and gets the sword and everything else.
Yes, Doeg was there. Remember? Doeg was there. Let's have a look and see if we can find
He was the
it.
weapon bearer. Was he the weapon bearer?
He was in charge of the shepherds. He was
The
there.
shepherds, yeah.
He was there in the city of Nov. Where are we now? Where have we gone to here? That's not the right place. Let's go to the previous chapter, chapter 21. It is in chapter 21. Okay, let's have a look. David comes to Nov. He says to Ahimelech, give me the bread, give me the sword. We're in chapter 21, Jeffrey, on the screen for you. Verse 8, please.
And there was a man of Saul's servants on that day detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds.
Stop there. That's all we are told about him. Just that he was there. We then go on to carry on the discussion between David and Ahimelech about the spear, the sword of Goliath. But the Tanakh tells us that Doeg the Edomite was there, and we spoke about this when we learned this chapter, that David should have seen him there and should have known that he was putting Ahimelech and the priests of Nov in danger, because Doeg would go back and report it to Shaul. And that's exactly what happened. We're told that there in chapter 21 that Doeg was there only as an introduction to our chapter, because Doeg pipes up and says, ooh, I know a little bit about all of this. And so we go back.
What does detained before the Lord mean? Was he
Gone,
not there or something?
Yeah, he had to go there. Remember, this is where the Mishkan was.
Yeah, he was praying there. Maybe David didn't see him. He was busy davening behind the screen or something.
No, well, the Mefarshim say that David did see him there and acted recklessly by asking for a sword, because he did see him. If he didn't see him, then that point's not valid. You're right. But the Mefarshim all seem to indicate that David knew he was there and should have, and they're critical of David, that he should have been more reticent about putting Achimelech in a very untenable position of apparently rebelling against the king. So if we go back to our chapter 22, Doeg now comes back to the fore, and we'll see what he's got to say. Now, Doeg the Edomite said, I saw the son of Jesse come to Nov, to Achimelech, the son of Achitub. Now, there's all sorts of undercurrents in that very simple pasuk. First of all, he calls David by his not pleasant name. Derogatory name. Yeah, thank you. Ben Yishai. Same words that Shaul used over here. Ben Yishai. So it's a technique that people do. When you want to align yourself with somebody, you use the same words as they do. If they refer to somebody as a scoundrel, and you refer to somebody else, the same person, as a scoundrel, it shows that you are allies. Doeg wanted to show Shaul that he was on Shaul's side. Why particularly did he want to do that?
Because he didn't want to be seen as one of the rebels.
Because if anybody is guilty of not telling Shaul, it's him. Because he is the only one of Shaul's servants around, that we know of at least, who actually saw David on the run. And the obvious question that Shaul will be asking him is, why didn't you tell me up till now? Why are you only telling me now? He's just said, none of you told me what's going on. So Doeg's in a bit of a problem now, because he's got information that he should have given to Shaul long before this time, and he hasn't done it. So what he does is he's trying to schmooze up to Shaul, as it were, by using the same expression to describe David as this derogatory term, Ben Yishai. And more than that, he tries to blame Achimelech, tries to shift the focus away from himself onto Achimelech, because Shaul has accused his people of failing to tell him what was going on. Doeg is about now to say, that's nothing. You should hear what Achimelech did. And he's trying to deflect Shaul's criticism and Shaul's anger against those who didn't tell him, and particularly Doeg, because Shaul now knows that Doeg had information and withheld it. And so now he's going to try and shift the blame for everything onto Achimelech. And he calls him Achimelech ben Achitub. He doesn't give him his name. Doesn't give him his title. What was Achimelech?
Kohen Gadol.
He was the Kohen. I don't know if he was the Kohen Gadol, but he was certainly in charge of the Kohenim there at Nov. There's a bit of a problem, because there seems to have been a bit of a split Mishkan at this time. So he may not have been the official Kohen Gadol, but he was certainly a Kohen Gadol. He was certainly
high priest is called.
Yeah, he was certainly in charge of the priests there. We can call him the Kohen Gadol. So you would expect, when a person was referring to Achimelech, to refer to him Shmuel Hanavi, Shaul HaMelech, Achimelech HaKohen. He deliberately does not give him the title Kohen. Why? Because he wants to denigrate him. So the word Kohen, the title of Kohen, and certainly the Kohen Gadol, is a title of honor. It's an honor to be a Kohen. You are the priest of God. When you mess with a Kohen, you're messing with God. And Doeg wants to brush over that, the fact that he's a Kohen, and he fails to give him his title of Achimelech HaKohen.
Why didn't you call him the son of Achitov? That's derogatory.
Well, he's got it, yeah, but maybe at the moment, we don't know who he is. So first of all, Achitov may have many sons. So the first time he has to give him his real name. Later on, he is, in fact, have a look at verse 12, Johnny. Jeffrey, read verse 12 for us.
Saul said, "Listen now, son of Achitov." And he said, "Here I am, my lord." Saul
Yeah,
said,
that'll do. So you're right, Johnny. He does use just son of Achitov. The first time, though, he's got to know who he is. If he'd have just said Ben Achitov, then Shaul would have said, "Which one, you idiot? He's got 10 sons." Right? So he says who it is, but he doesn't give him his title. Doesn't, huh?
Ishai also had a load of sons.
Yeah, but we know who he's talking about here. David is clearly the one he's talking about. So he says to him, "I saw him," and then he quickly adds, and you know what he did? This Achitov fellow, verse 10, Jeffrey.
He inquired of Hashem for him, and he gave him provisions, and he gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. So he asked God.
Stop there. Is that true?
No.
Is that pasuk true? Why is it not true, Paul?
But he didn't give it to him, just told him where it was.
Okay, very good. Yeah, gave him provisions and gave him the sword of Goliath. Well, he gave him provisions, that's true, but he was demanded from them. And correctly, he did not give him the sword of Goliath. He told him where it was, and he says, "Take it if you want it. I'm not giving it to you." So Doeg has deliberately put a bad spin on what's gone on and painted it in as bad a way as he possibly can in order to deflect the Shaul's anger from himself onto Achimelech. There's something else not right about that pasuk. What else is it?
Did he inquire to God?
No, he didn't. Well spotted, Michael. He did not inquire of God on his behalf. In fact, quite the contrary. Dafka did not. He was not impressed. You can tell from the language. We'll stop there because it's time up. We'll begin with that next week. That Doeg has added something here, which he didn't do. He inquired of the Lord on his behalf. Achimelech did nothing of the sort. And in fact, you'll see when Shaul has a go at Achimelech, he stresses the fact that he inquired of the Lord. And Achimelech says, "No, I didn't." And you'll see that hopefully next week. So there's what Doeg has done here is to take half truth and make it into a different situation. And he's taken his lead from this from a very, very ancient piece of history. Who else in the Torah added something on in order to make his case? Bit of an obtuse question. I know the answer, so the question, the question fits the answer that I want to give. Somebody in very, very ancient history in the Torah added on something in order to make his case against a certain situation with another person.
Was it Cain and Heber?
No, but you're very close.
Oh, is that
Adam
and then the
serpent. He made
The serpent. Well done, Paul. You read my obtuse mind. What did the serpent say to Chava? Why don't you eat from this fruit? And what did Chava say?
She said she wasn't allowed to eat it, but she wasn't allowed to touch it, rather.
Yeah, she said she wasn't allowed to touch it. Is that true?
No.
No, she wasn't. She wasn't. So the Midrash tells us, it's all Midrash, of course, this. The Midrash tells us that the serpent then pushes Chava against the tree and she touches the fruit. And he says, see, you didn't die by touching it. Like you said, you won't die if you eat it. And that was what tipped the balance to Chava to eat the fruit. All Midrash, all allegory, but it's an example of the danger of exaggerating a situation. This was done deliberately here in our case to make Achimelech look even worse than he was. He didn't give the sword of Goliath. He said, you can take it. And he didn't do anything of the sort, inquiring of the Lord on David's behalf. But Doeg wanted to make Achimelech look as bad as possible in order to deflect the anger of Shaul from himself. And he is very successful in that, as we will see next week. So next week we will begin with the response of Shaul when he hears what Doeg has to say about what Achimelech does. You'll see Shaul's response. If you don't want a spoiler, don't read on. And we'll do that next week, Be'ezrat Hashem. Any questions, comments, or complaints? No? Well, that's a first. No complaints. Right. Okay. In that case, I shall wish you a Shavua Tov.
What time's Mincha, Johnny? I forgot to look.
What time's Mincha? I don't know.
About 6:20.
No. It'll be about 7:20.
Yeah. Right. Sorry.
7 o'clock
Yeah.
at snack.
What?
7 o'clock at snack.